Hello and welcome back for some more books. Goody goody. I will start with a book that I basically missed back in 2023 and has since become the CWA Gold Dagger. He has won the award. Una Mannion's Tell Me What I Am. She's already written one other novel, A Crooked Tree, and has a very, very unique writing style. This book is sort of categorized as a thriller, but I'm not really sure. It's like that doesn't do it justice. It's won a thriller or crime writing award. It's always one of the problems. What category am I going to put a book into? It is a story of, I suppose, of two women, of three, but of two women who are trying to reconnect. They're an aunt and a niece. It's a story of abuse, of coercive control, but not written in a way that I've come across before, because there are a lot, and I have been reading an awful lot of books recently on the marriage that goes wrong because of an bullying, intimidating, over-controlling partner. And this is one of those rare ones that just doesn't get it wrong, because so many sensationalize it or come up with parts of the storyline where you go, nah, that's not a thing that would happen. And this one remains very true to that complete confusion of, and that sort of, no, I have to stay with this person because, and mostly it's because you have a child. We meet Ruby, who is the main focus of our story. We meet her when she's 18. And that's where our story opens, and Ruby's on the phone to someone. And then we go back in time to see where Ruby's story begins and what went wrong. So we have two sisters living in Philadelphia, Dina and Nessa. And Nessa is the aunt that we're going to meet. Dina gets involved with Lucas. Lucas is very charming, slightly older, and through many shenanigans that you have to read, kind of squirrels Dina away. She's a maternity neonatal clinic nurse, and there have been attempts facilitated by Nessa, who has sort of earmarked Lucas as being not quite right, and wanting always to keep Dina to himself. And then eventually we get to a point where, after many sort of swapping of chapters, Dina disappears. And Nessa is convinced Lucas had something to do with it. She had been living back with Nessa at the time. And Ruby, who is their child and is a very small toddler, maybe about 4, the custody is given back to her father, as is the law, and the father consequently takes her out to Vermont. Now, you spend a lot of time in Ruby's life where Lucas homeschools, teaches her amazing resilience, how to row, how to fish, how to survive in the wilderness. And there is his mother, Clover, who is in that ambiguous position of loving Ruby and defending her son. That we as a reader can see as being, as being someone who has to be managed. But Ruby, when you grow up in an abusive and controlling situation, you don't know anything else. So it's a story about how Ruby is going to have possibly a coming awareness of this, and Nessa is going to try and track down Ruby. It's about how the law does or doesn't, pay attention to these stories. It's about what can be done. It's about how your struggle as a family member of someone who's been in a relationship or is still in a coercive, controlling relationship can be sidelined. How parental, how the law protects both parents. It's an absolutely enthralling read because we watch Ruby learn not to upset her father. We watch particularly the Clover, who is Ruby's grandmother, Lucas's mum, and we watch her positioning all the way along in this story, which may or may not, is she an ally? It's an absolute humdinger, because basically what we're watching is these two women over time are unraveling backwards, because Ruby knows that she has memories from somewhere else and someone else. She's been told a story about her mother, and she needs to know the truth, because that truth will tell her what or who she is. It's an absolute, it's a thriller in that sense. It's a very cleverly put together, not it's not bleak because it has rage and it has strength, um, but it also makes you feel a bit of rage about how women are so often not listened to, not protected by the systems. But Ruby will keep you completely on side, and you lots of ambiguity, which is what makes her so masterful as a writer, Mannion, is that at times you're looking at Lucas and saying, I don't hate this guy. Like there's logic to, like, nothing is just goody baddie, and Mannion completely writes into the heart of that. Absolutely stunning. Now we've got I've got a real lineup today that would knock your socks off. Sean Wilson, Australian writer. I have my reading copy here. I'm not going to say I raced through this because I read it quite fast, but savoured it at the same time. It's called You Must Remember This, and it is a book about memory, and it's a book about what you can remember, what you must remember, and what your past makes you remember, won't let you let go of, and how at the end of your life, people might not always understand why you do or don't remember them. Very poignant. It's absolutely beautifully written. Now, there's an opening scene in this where we meet Grace, who is our story. And we understand that Grace is elderly, as that first chapter unfolds, and is trying to decode or make sense of her understanding and basically of her environment. She's trying to understand where she is, because all of a sudden you feel that she's been parachuted into an environment and doesn't know what, is trying to work out who she is, where she is. And we understand as that little first chapter unfolds, that she's actually walking along a freeway, and that everything that her senses are telling her are not giving her names for what she's seeing. So I think we understand quite fast that we're dealing with someone who hasn't got all their faculties. And in fact, as we go forward, we realize Grace has got dementia, is at, in her twilight years, and has difficulty decoding her world. Now, another book that has these two very strong and quite different threads, but it's all Grace. So we have Grace's, a period of her current late life where there are people who come to see her, and sometimes she can recognize them, particularly her daughter, Liz, and sometimes granddaughter Claire. And there are times when, she kind of surfaces and says, oh, you're Liz, you're my daughter. And there are times when she doesn't. It's just a woman who's holding her hands and saying things to her, and she's going, who is this? And she's being moved to a care home near the sea. But the second story, the story which sort of tethers us, because we have all of these fragmented, wandering, sort of circuitous, non-linear parts of her current, and then we have this strong story about who Grace was as a child. And it feels very much like a piece of writing which shows us how our long-term memory, the memory from far back, is actually very clear. And episodes of it will be very clear to us. But our short-term, or our memory of our yesterday and what I ate and who this person is, has become completely befuddled. So there's a kind of a backbone that everything else is tethered to. And that backbone tells us the story of Grace as a young child growing up with appalling parents, Des and Annie. And Annie is particularly abusive and careless of her daughter. And they have twin sons who are younger, and Grace finds herself lumped with being the responsible person very, very young. Des is kind of feckless and makes money on the dogs or on the horses, and but is kind of in thrall to Annie, but seems to spend most of his life in a stupor. And we look at this appalling hardship, um, and this attempt by Grace to to do the right thing, to try and get money for food from her parents, where she has to go and find them at the pub, and all the things that how that's going to play out. It's and then well, I'm not going to tell you everything, but when we get to what Wilson, I think, is doing, he's not just looking at how memory works, and how distressing it can be when it doesn't quite work. And he also shows us like how Liz deals with her own mother, the sort of the impatience, the way we don't always understand what's going on, because it's this sort of slide into it can be coherent and then suddenly it's not. And we're not prepared for that necessarily. Um, that's why you read books like this. It's fascinating. And then you you see the kind of the way the language changes, where people kind of don't confront you or contradict you and just go yes, yes, yes. But it is about what when people say you must remember this. Is I mean, how can a daughter sit and face her mother and her mother not remember her, yet can remember clearly, an incident about a coat when they were 11. It's not just you must remember this. It's also what are the things in her life that great marriage that she had, and also the things that repeat. That if a mother isn't kind to a child, is that going to necessarily be reenacted in the next episode in your life? Fabulous, fabulous, short, but contains multitudes. An absolutely stunning read. And the last one up is Robert Lukins's Somebody Down There Likes Me. Oh, I had such a ball with this book. Lukins has written two others, and I very much loved Loveland, the last one. He does, he said, an Australian writer, but I said this one in America, like Loveland, and I think Everlasting Sunday was the UK, and God forgive me if I'm wrong. Somebody Down There Likes Me is, I think I worked out quite fast, or at least I kind of had a feeling quite fast, that when you're going to name your main family, and this is a book about one family, and when you look at the names that he uses, I was already kind of snorting. Ooh, how unladylike. The family is called the Gulch family. And of course, my brain sort of went, yeah, Gulch, Gulch, that's an American word for a ravine, or, a sharp, well, yes, a ravine caused by water. But it also kind of felt like lots of things. Like Gulch is sort of, greedy, and it's glottal, and it's the name of a Dickensian villain. And I thought, well, that's a great start, because I'm going to love the Gulch family. They're very, very, very wealthy and live in an enclave in East Coast, Connecticut, I think. And they live in one of those, havens for the terribly, terribly wealthy, and they all belong to the same clubs, and they all know each other, and they all love each other's scandals and hate each other and have affairs with each other. And you get into this world. Again, with names, we have the parents are called Fax. I love it. And Honey. And Fax, rather like the obsolete piece of technology, is there's something oldie, worldy, and not quite connected. He's also in a drug-filled stupor most of the time, but has made a huge amount of money. And Honey is the person who keeps everything going, but is no selfless, traditional mothering person. She's completely the opposite. She says her business acumen is equal to his, if not, as she thinks herself, superior. And they have two children, Lincoln, I will say no more about that name, and Kick. And of course, that name will give us the idea that she's rebellious, as indeed she is. She has decided she doesn't really love all this money and this kind of suffocating, claustrophobic relationship with her family. And all of them have suffered, or not suffered, but Link and Kick have suffered in different ways. And there are backstories to that. But Link, you kind of feel, is an emotional, bleeding heart, but by the same token, really isn't. And he has inherited this dream that he will get all the money. But what is happening to this family is that they are, or have found out via sources, that they're on the brink of being raided for corrupt practices, and the whole empire of theirs is about to collapse. And behind this story, if you like, there is a story of Kick and her friendships. And of course, we're very interested in how she figures in all of this, because she's the one who's able to look a little bit better at the family and see it a bit for what it is, even though you know that the bond to Link is very strong, and she kind of looks at her parents like sort of some sort of weird figures in a play. She and her best friend Prisley, another great name, had another friend called Mouse. We're having fun here. And Mouse is one of those fragile people who feels everything, understands everything, and doesn't quite get the rest of the world, and has over-focused on facts a little bit, and may have had it, improper sort of, have a bit of a crush, or I don't know. But that how girls kind of can be not nice or nice to each other, how the weak among us can possibly also be the strong. And Mouse also, she goes missing, and does anybody know anything about that? And is it what we think it is? And what the story is? So you have to go right through to get to the ending of finding out what happens to who, how is this all going to go down? Are they actually going to be busted by, the corruption services? And emotionally, how are all the people in this story, the four most important people in this story, going to position themselves to, brace themselves for the coming fallout? It is in places laugh out loud, but it's also a very sarcastic, sort of witty takedown, if you like, of the, well, expose, you might say, of the kind of the wealthy, the billionaire class in America. It's very, very timely. It's not like anything I've read before. I mean, there have been lots of stories about wealthy families staying nasty, and this kind of doesn't want to do that. We're invited into the interior lives of all of these family members, and there's something to like, something to admire, and something to absolutely despise in almost all of them. So an absolute stunner. Love that one. That's it. Three's enough, and we'll do more next time. So in the meantime, get reading, and I will see you again. So I'm going to start that all over again.